Hello and welcome to this, the second in the series of 3 videos on getting the most from your camcorder. In this film, we will be discussing the next element of your production, which follows on from shooting, and that is editing. If you intend to do more with your camcorder footage than just shoot and play back the results, then editing is the next creative step to take. Right, well let's just look at a basic editing setup which I suppose many of us would be able to assemble in our home. In front of me we've got the domestic TV with the tuner, we've got our mains, in this case VHS deck, and we've got our camcorder. Now what I've done is actually attached the video out and audio out with some cables into the back of our mains deck, so we're actually taking a clean feed now of the video and audio into our mains deck, and we set the mains deck onto audio visual, so it's actually going to accept the inputs as line inputs. And all I need to do is insert a VHS tape into our machine and actually hit play and record, followed by pause. So now our mains deck is actually parked ready to receive the first signal. Ignore the bands which you can see on the bottom of the screen, that's just something that this deck puts out when it's in pause. Right, so earlier on today I just popped out into our garden, and the field next to us there's somebody actually working with a tractor and with a piece of agricultural machinery. So we'll just actually put this into play and we'll have a look at some of the shots we've got. Do you recognise any of this? Because very often you see some people's camcorder tapes and you've got shots of the pavement and people's feet. Right, so we ignore the first shot obviously. So I'm just playing this through at the moment just to see what we've got. That's quite a nice steady shot, so I'll probably want to use that. It's also a wide shot, so it'll do as a nice introduction to our scene. So I need to rewind that. Okay, we'll just wait till it becomes stable. So back at the beginning again. Right, so pause that there. Now what we need to do is actually trigger the mains deck into record at the same time as releasing the play button on our camcorder. This is a little bit fiddly, so here goes. Right, our first shot is now obviously going down the wires into our mains deck. What we need to do next is to get ready with the pause button on the mains deck, which I'll do now. Hope I was quick enough. It's a little bit hit and miss, so you've got to try and plan as much as possible ahead when you're doing this. Now we're still playing out from the camcorder of course, but we've actually paused on our editing deck. Whoops, we don't want that obviously. So I'm just getting the camera, that looks fairly stable. Let's just watch this for a second before we actually transfer the material to our tape to make sure it's okay. Looks nice and steady to me, so we'll go back a little bit. A bit more perhaps. Okay, hit pause again. So actually pausing on our camcorder, and one more time, hopefully, we'll hit this. So this is playing and this is now recording. So it's actually, they're actually baling hay. So this machine is now going to release a bale. It's quite an interesting shot. Get ready with our pause button on the mains deck. Hit pause. Hopefully just in time again. So we've now got two shots assembled. Right, what's happening next? Whoops, we don't want that. Okay, it looks fairly acceptable. Go back a little bit. I think it's stabilized just about there. So again, we do the same procedure. We only need a couple of seconds of this. Pause again. Scene's a little bit boring, so we really don't want it to last too long on our actual edited tape. Alright, we'll just watch it play on. Whoops. All sorts of nasties here. Oh, there goes the focus, so we obviously don't want that. That looks okay, doesn't it? Say from about there onwards. So rewind. Pause. Once again, take that shot onto the VHS tape. A bit of pause again. So even though they're quite short, we're actually condensing the real passage of time, which is never a bad thing with video. Okay, we've gone back to a wide shot here, so we may as well make this our actual finishing shot. So just look to when that is acceptable. About there, I think. We'll make this our last shot. And I'll get ready just with the pause button now on the actual recorder. Right. Well, obviously that was quite simple. So what I think we better do next is to stop our camcorder and actually watch the VHS tape back. So we'll put it into play now. Visually rewind. And see how it looks. Okay. It's our first shot. It's quite nice. We know where we are now. Just made it to shot number 2. Out comes the bale. Back to a wide shot, though not quite as wide as before. Right, close up again. And our wide shot. So you see that really didn't take too long to do at all. Now, this is quite an efficient way and probably one of the most cost-effective ways in which you can actually reduce the length of some of the epics that might be currently doing the rounds with holidays and what have you. So it's worthwhile just looking at our editing setup once more. All we've done is to connect the audio and video outputs from the camcorder to the audio and video inputs on our mains VHS deck. You might have a deck with a SCART input, in which case a video audio to SCART connector is needed. We can take the signal to our TV with either video and audio again, or via the RF output. And we've got an effective basic editing setup. Obviously the editing setup that we've just used at home will not offer the quality of program we need for this video. The last scenes I filmed of the tractor baling hay were shot on VHS-C and transferred to VHS. However, I didn't want to get too far away from the formats that camcorder users are familiar with, so the rest of the shooting and editing examples in this video have been shot on SVHS, on this KY19 camcorder from JVC, and subsequently edited on an SVHS Professional Edit Suite. All we need now to make our video program is an interesting subject. A theme for our film would be more interesting than just showing editing techniques with a series of unrelated shots. We've come to this Welsh town of Usk in South Wales as our location. Each year the town enters a national competition called Britain in Bloom, and it has won the Welsh finals 12 times and the national finals twice. The main displays are kept up on a largely voluntary basis. I know that the finished film for our purposes will be around 5 minutes. Quite short, I know, but it will illustrate most editing principles and hopefully be of interest because of the discipline of time. I have a list of people we can interview who will have something of value to contribute towards the film. It is always best to research your subject if at all possible, and have some idea of where you want to take the viewer, in terms of your own personal viewpoint. You are in effect the producer, and the programme will only succeed if you give it a direction. I don't want this to be a short programme all about growing flowers. This isn't Gardener's World. A more unusual slant would be to get across to the viewer how the town's success in its competition has improved the quality of life for its residents. Let's start off with some shots of the town. We're not quite sure yet of what direction the film will take, but we do know we'll need some stock shots of displays and people gardening, etc. Well, I'm in the main square, which is the focal point of Usk, and as you can see, it's a very attractive scene to start with. So getting nice shots won't be difficult. It's just trying to make the shot more interesting. That's where the creativity part of making films with your camcorder comes in. Now, immediately behind me, you might be able to see a park bench which lies next to the car park. But between that and ourselves, of course, are those trees. You could look at the shot one way and say, well, the trees have ruined the shot. But what we intend to do is make use of this and actually do a tight shot and pan down from the trees to the people sitting on the bench. Let's try that. Remember, if you don't get it right first time, try it again. These sort of shots can be a little bit difficult, especially if you're using the zoom or telephoto end of the lens, but it's worth getting right. Now, you probably noticed in the previous scene, as the camera panned around the square, the clock tower. Well, I want to make use of this as a feature. Now, the easy way, of course, to do it is just to film it with a camcorder on your shoulder. But I don't want to go for that, and that's usually one of the most common mistakes people make with their camcorder, is the idea that everything should be done from the height of your eye level. What I've done, in fact, is to sight the camera down a little bit lower. I've got this little display of flowers here in the foreground, and the clock tower just behind that, and the shot is quite wide. In fact, I'm as wide as the wide end of the zoom will go. So let's just run the camera on that and see what it looks like. It's quite nice actually, because we've got a little bit of flaring, that's to say a streak of light from the sun, which is just coming through on the lens. So it's got quite a nice atmosphere to it. And like I say, this is the sort of shot that camcorder users can use to their advantage, because a camcorder can be placed anywhere, at ground level or high up. It doesn't necessarily have to be the domain of just 5 foot from the ground. Now, this is an interesting shot. Now, immediately it may not appear to be so to you, but if you look at the screen, you'll see the way it's giving lines of perspective. We've got interest in the back of the shot with cars moving through it, and I'm hoping to turn this to our advantage. Now, to do so, we needn't necessarily move the camera. I'm actually going to lock the camera off now, and this is quite an interesting technique. And we'll just let people and cars move through the shot. The same might be said in many instances of an establishing shot, but I'm just going to use this anywhere in our completed film. Let's run some footage now. And as you can see, we've immediately got some people just passing us in the shot. Well, that's very nice indeed. We can use that almost anywhere, but it's a good supportive shot. Now, a very useful feature on most modern camcorders is autofocus. Now, if you can take the time to actually switch autofocus out, you can be quite creative with the focus barrel itself. I have just behind me a railing, and again about 10 feet or so behind that, the water pump. Now, if we actually focus as close as we can, till it is in focus, the railing, and then by moving the lens barrel, focus on the water pump behind, we can actually create a shot of interest. Just look at this. Right, we'll start with the railing. Now, this is quite fiddly, so just take your time and turn the focus barrel slowly. There you are, you see we just didn't quite get that right, so try it one more time, it's worth getting right. Right, here we go. Around till we see the pump behind. And that's made what could have been a static shot more interesting, and it's also another creative arm of video production. And following on now, we've actually changed our position with the other side of the main road, and opposite us, if you'd like to pan around, you'll notice what we're actually hoping to get in shot now. We have the entrance from one of the main car parks in Usk, and I like the look of this shot because we've got the archway, which is sort of defining the overall appearance of the shot. Either side we've got flowers, which fits the bill nicely for our film, and so we're just going to let the camera roll for a minute or two and see what we can get. We just want people walking through the shot, just to give it extra interest. Now I've set up my camera position immediately in front of Usk Police Station, which won an award for its flowers, so we need to introduce this into the film. Now, an easy way of introducing something into a film is by an establishing shot, but I want to do a little bit more than that. So what we intend to do is to focus up on the constabulary badge just above the doorway there and pull back. Let's give that a go. Right, here we go. We'll pull back. That's quite a nice way of introducing the scene to the viewer. As we mentioned before, video is a creative medium, and when you've got your camcorder, always be on the lookout for unusual places from which you can film. With our subject, An Usk in Bloom, we visited the castle grounds, and immediately behind me, the castle turrets provided the perfect view for a great many interesting shots. Another good example of the importance of choosing a good tripod on which to put your camcorder is when you come to do a pan. Now here we have a nice row of cottages in front of us, and for the Usk in Bloom film we intend just to do a gentle pan across the screen. Again, this could be used almost anywhere within the film. Let's try that now. So we'll just start off nice and steady. Try and keep the pace of the pan fairly smooth. Don't try to jerk the tripod at all. And then there. It's quite important when you start one of these pans to work out beforehand where you're going to end the shot, otherwise it might come across as a little bit indecisive. One useful feature which both professional and most domestic camcorders share is the macro function. Now this is a very useful feature as it allows you to get in close to subjects of interest. We're just going to try it now on a few individual flowers. And also by doing this, it'll give me an interesting option should I decide to edit my footage later on to switch between the close-up and the whole shot. Right, we've been busy, and I think we have enough material now to support our film. If we haven't, then we'll just have to return to this after our interviews. Let's look at a basic editing environment now. We're actually going to be using this two-machine edit suite. Now in front of me we have the source machine, and into this we're going to place our camera tapes, which we've now shot. And just across from that we have our editing deck. Now, just as in the example you saw earlier between the camcorder and VHS deck, all we intend to do is just take the electronic information from the source to the editing machine. And you might have noticed immediately in front of me we have what we call an edit controller. Now, you can, in this instance, drive these machines from the front. However, for the purpose of what we intend to do in this program, which is covering assemble editing and insert editing, we can show it using this main edit controller deck as well. Now, with editing in mind, we're using interviews as the basis for our short video to be shown right at the end of this film. A useful tip when you use your camcorder with editing in mind later on is to be aware of the dangers of crossing the line. If we were, for example, to film two people talking with one placed here and another here, try to keep the camera on one side of the action. Then when you edit the shots, they'll look like this. However, if you keep crossing this line like this, then this will happen and the edited shots will look wrong. Another tip when shooting to edit is to let the camcorder run on to get what we call a wild track. That is to say, extra soundtrack for the scene, which could be used in editing to hide subsequent audio cuts and perhaps make scenes like this feel more natural. Let's look at an interview now with Michael Keyes from Usk in Bloom. We're just letting the camera run on for a few seconds before we start. So Michael will take his position.
Well, this is the 11th year that Usk in Bloom has been in existence. Started up by a few volunteers.
You might have noticed that Michael was just going to start into his routine. We've asked him about Usk in Bloom and its history. So he's just about to start into that. And I wasn't quite ready for the shot. Now, don't be afraid if you're interviewing someone to stop them. You might think it impolite at the time, but as a rule of thumb, people do appreciate if you just say, well, I wasn't ready. So in this case, that's exactly what I did say.
Why? I wasn't quite ready. Oh. Why?
Which might come as a bit of a surprise. But, you know, if you're a bit unhappy, perhaps the camera moved at the front of the shot as he started to speak. Just let your subject start again. Obviously, don't leave it till they've spoken, say, for 5 minutes perfectly, and then tell them that. It's best to tell them right at the start. So now we'll run the interview again.
This is the 11th year that Usk in Bloom has been in existence. Started up by a few volunteers that thought the town needed tidying up, and that floral displays would attract visitors to the town. At the beginning, there were just 2 or 3 people involved, and it was extremely hard work. Since then, the volunteer force that have come and helped us has increased, and as you can see, the town has justifiably got the name of the prettiest town in Wales for flower arrangement. It helps to bring in tourists into the town in a tremendous amount. The volume comes into the town every year seems to increase. It's extremely hard work. My contribution is helping with the fundraising and also with the watering. Should we stop now for the lorry?
Now this is interesting because usually I have to stop people if we get something like a lorry passing behind the shot or something which is extraneously making a noise and can ruin the shot. Now Michael's done TV work before, fortunately. In fact, he's been interviewed on Gardener's World. So he had an inkling there that we'd be stopping him in his flow. Now what struck me immediately before that, and you need to pay attention, if you're going to use interviews as, say, a framework for a film, is to make sure that the interviews are accurate. And I'll just spin back now to something that Michael said a few moments ago.
And as you can see, the town has justifiably got the name of the prettiest town in Wales for flower arrangements.
Now, Michael's actually inadvertently said it's got the title of the prettiest town in Wales for flower arrangements, which is wrong because we're not talking about flowers stuck in vases. So that's just a small point, but I know that it will probably be picked up as a mistake by the rest of the townsfolk who might see this film. So I'd still like to use the interview because obviously Michael's given us the structure to work our way into the film. And what I intend to do is to actually go back to Michael sometime between now and the end of the edited film and get him just to rephrase the last piece of that interview so that we can say something like the prettiest town in Wales for its gardens. So that's just something which we need to correct later on, and we'll just actually make an audio change there. Immediately that might mean that we'll have a break in the vision between Michael speaking the piece which is in front of us now and the piece in which he makes the correction, but we'll come to that a little bit later on. Right, I'm quite pleased with that. That's quite a nice descriptive opening to Usk in Bloom, and Michael said all the things which I hoped he would say. If you're interviewing somebody and they're looking to you for prompting, well, by all means give them some prompting, but don't over-elaborate, otherwise they'll be so full of ideas in their head, you won't get the best from them. It's quite nice to keep it natural. Keep the camera running, and with editing in mind, of course, you can use the relevant bits. So what I intend to do now is to lose Michael. Thank you very much, Michael. And move to another interview which we've done. and this is on a separate tape again. Now this is a gentleman called Peter Woodywis, and obviously you can see from the shot straight away that he's got quite an amazing array of flowers around his home. So again, we've looked carefully at the shot, seeing how we frame it. We've actually filled it with flowers as a shot, and Peter's going to give us a little bit of description of how he came to move to Usk and how important to feature the Usk in bloom and its efforts have made towards his life. So let's just run that interview now.
Well, it's only my second year here, isn't it? Yes.
Is it?
Second summer here, yes.
All right.
What is that? Now, Peter's actually started to laugh there, and we can't help it as well, because up to now, this has probably been the quietest part of the whole shoot. And we're in a cul-de-sac where we seem to be away from all traffic noise. It's absolute bliss. And suddenly, the church just across from us, the bell starts ringing, so we've got to stop the camera. So we'll just run on from there. And Peter's just pointed it out to us.
Well, we've actually lived in Gwent for over 30 years, but I left my other house and we moved here about 18 months ago. So this is only my second summer down here.
Now, Peter's smiling again, of course. We've got workmen who just happened to start at work at the same time, and they were actually building a house behind the back of Peter's home. So this is just another consideration. I'm wondering whether we go on with the shot. I've started to travel in as Peter starts to speak, because we want to try and make each shot a little bit different. So we'll just run on. And you can see there's pregnant pauses all around because we're not sure whether we can continue with the interview.
Well, being invalided out of work, I had to have another interest, and I only started gardening after I was invalided out of work. And coming down here, idle hands get up to mischief, and I want to make the time work for me as opposed to just sitting twiddling my thumbs. So I got a greenhouse, and I seem to produce all the plants for the neighbourhood down here now.
Now that's the bit which I'll probably use, where Peter's saying how he started to come into the area, how he lives in the area, how he started to grow his own plants, and everyone seems to be coming to him for cuttings and what have you. Of course, Peter turned away from camera, so we're naturally, as a viewer, expecting to look at what he's indicating behind. So I know now that we will have, if we're going to come to editing, we need to get all these cutaway shots, so we need one of Peter working. So we'll just run the interview on a little bit further.
I can show you that later on if you want to.
He's actually just said he'll show us that later on, and of course we can't have him in vision saying that. So obviously, as he turned his back to camera just now and said, I grow my own cuttings, we'll actually cut that into our film as a cutaway of him in his greenhouse. And so what we've done here now is, after the interview's finished, we know what we need. We took a careful log of what was said in the interview, so we're still at the same location, and you'll notice there's no sound on this bit. There's no need to take sound, because obviously Peter's interview will be the structure for the piece. We have quite a few other interviews with various townspeople, but we haven't time to look at them all now. We shall only be using 4 or 5 in our completed film. Let's look now at the technicalities involved in post-production. Let's first look at assemble editing. This graphic represents the videotape, with the video occupying the bulk of the pictures and the audio track on the top of the tape. Assemble editing is when we put our shots down onto our master tape in a set order, starting with shot number 1, perhaps a street scene, followed by shot number 2, another scene, and in this illustration, shot 3, something else perhaps. As you can see, the pictures and sound are put down together for each shot. Now you just go on assembling the shots you need to make your finished program. This is a very fast way of editing. It's not that flexible, however. You are basically stuck with the original soundtrack that was recorded with each shot. I've assemble edited a sequence and used just the start and finish of my piece to camera, having cut out the middle section I didn't want. Let's look at that now. tourism has become one of the most important growth industries in the late 1980s. It has brought with it job opportunities that have become welcome news for many rural areas. Now, you are probably aware that the shot didn't look right. It didn't sound right either. What you've just seen is what we call a jump cut. That's an edit in Vision that looks wrong for that very reason. If we need to cut dialogue for other reasons, such as to remove gaps or mistakes when someone is talking, for example, we also get the same problem.
Committee at the beginning of the year and decide what colour schemes we're going to use. All the committee obviously have a say in it, and we feel that if we have a theme running through, we get better displays than if we have higgledy-piggledy, a bit of this and a bit of that.
This is an interview that we'll use in Uskin Bloom. We need to hide the jump cuts with another visual over the top. Now this is where insert editing comes into its own. If we look at this graphic, we can see our original shot. But with insert editing, we can insert a new shot on top, whilst keeping the old soundtrack, which is shown on the top of the tape. With insert editing, we can replace the old soundtrack with commentary or music, and if we're using a linear soundtrack with 2 channels of sound, we can mix music, live sound, or commentary, whatever. It gives editing great flexibility. Our editing tape has to be what is known as blacked first. Now we do this by the recording of a constant video signal to the tape we intend to edit onto. This process of blacking a tape will give us what is known as a control track, as we can see here. Of course, you won't be able to see it with your eye. This is just for purposes of demonstration. Now, a control track is just a video signal recorded onto the tape. If you were to play back a blacked tape, you'll only see what you originally recorded onto it, which might be colour bars, or a picture from your camcorder, or just black, hence the term. When we play our black tape, the editing machine can follow the recorded control track, so it knows exactly when to begin and stop an edit. With a control track, the editor can pre-roll 10 seconds before the edit point, so that when the source and editing machine begin to start an edit, the tape, having these 10 seconds, will be running at the proper speed when an actual edit point is reached. Back to our film now. Well, we've looked at interviews as the mainstay of telling our story of the floral efforts of Uskin Bloom. But we will have periods in the video when we will need the extra element, commentary. Now what is important is if you're going to move from one subject matter to another and you're not reliant on possibly the interview to carry you there, you do need a voiceover. And I spoke to Peter Twist, who is a well-known, nationally renowned voiceover artist and regularly works for BBC One, BBC Two. And I asked him what makes a good voiceover.
Very difficult question. What makes a good voiceover? It's very subjective, as lots of people know. Some people like a soft voice, some people like a voice that possibly shouts at them. But it also depends on the style of the video. There's no point in having a really soft voice for an action-packed video. What a professional voiceover can do is adapt to the style that you want. You literally book a voiceover and you say, this is what we want, and go ahead and do it. So that's a good reason for using a professional voiceover. Also, because you've got your interviews in the video, it's necessary to link them together. And a voiceover is a very quick way to condense a lot of information with an anonymous voice and just help the video to flow a little bit better. And people take voiceovers for granted, but I think it is a very important part of the video.
Now music, as many of you probably know, is an integral part of making programs, and it's surprising just how much importance is placed on providing the right music to set the mood of a scene. And all too often you can spend hours and hours searching through CDs to try and get the right music to accompany your shots. Now I actually visited AVP, based in Malvern, and to many of you probably know AVP for its copyright-free music library. And I spoke to Bob Cartwright about the differing types of editing you can use in a production.
Well, there are 2 types of editing. You can either shoot material to edit deliberately, or you can edit in camera. Now, for example, in my particular case, When I shoot any domestic or events in my family, I always edit in camera. It maintains the sort of the spontaneity of the occasion. All the errors go in there, which are equally amusing, and also it keeps down the generations as well. I don't mind. It doesn't have to be perfection for me on my particular case. So what I tend to do is edit in camera, and then when it's an SVHS-C, when that spool is filled up, I then transfer it over to my larger VHS spool, which is my family library at home, which works fine, and it's nice then to just put it into the machine and run back any time you want to see some memories. Now on the professional side, what tends to happen is, when I take out a full crew with the equipment, is you either go to a situation where you've got full control over it. In other words, it's all been scripted, every shot, you know exactly what it's going to be, you've had the storyboard, you've designed the shots in sketch form, no matter how simple they be. In my particular case, it's always matchstick men, but it works for me. And then you can see physically how the film all runs together. I'm told that when Spielberg did Raiders of the Lost Ark, when you walked into the production room, it was a very large room, it was like walking into a cartoon strip, because the cartoon started at the top of the wall, went all the way around the room, in a spiral, right to the very end, and everybody got a feel of the film before an ounce of celluloid was shot. So that's a good example of how preparation and planning can really give you the best results. On the other side of things, there are various films that I've done where you're put into a situation where you have no control over the actual events that are happening in front of you. You've got to try and shoot it, but you're also shooting with the knowledge that you're going to edit it, because obviously you're not editing in camera. Now, the two particular examples I'm going to show you are one for a film I shot for the Heineken Music Festival. The scenario is here. You have a music festival which travels around England and has it's vibrant, it's exciting, there are lots of people, lots of fun. It's a big family occasion, a big family event, and the film had to put over the introduction had to put over this excitement, the size, and the entertainment value. Now I'm going to show you the first introduction piece to that, which is about a minute or so long, and that tries to put that over. Now you'll see that in the majority of shots I didn't use a tripod. Well, I couldn't, because the numbers of people involved and the speed in which you had to get the shot to get the actual atmosphere didn't allow that. You also, I was in a situation where, knowing I was going to put this to music, and this was going to be a music festival, you can break a lot of the rules that you shouldn't break. So you can cross the line, you can have crash edits, you can have jump cuts, you can have crash zooms, you can wobble the camera, you can put the strobe on where it shouldn't be on, and it creates the ambience of the actual event, which in this case it does. So let's have a look at that introduction, and then we'll go on to another example.
The 1993 Heineken Music Festival kicked off its six-city tour of the UK in June, in its biggest and best shape yet, with the news that a new 3-year agreement had been signed, taking Europe's #1 free music event to 1995. Thus reinforcing Heineken Lager Beer's continued commitment to brand awareness and appeal among the key 18 to 24-year-old age group. This fourth summer celebration of popular music boasted a new king-size big top tent, upgraded PA and state-of-the-art lighting, a new second stage for local and emerging bands, and its most vital roster of contemporary acts to date.
Well, that was a situation where the brief was to capture the atmosphere and put over what the festivals were all about. It was a great success. Now, on the other side, the next example is a film I produced which covered the Cotswolds, called Cotswolds Country. Now, the brief here, I had full control over everything, and every particular shot was set up, so therefore everything is with tripod. The lighting is controlled. Well, in this particular case, the sequence I'm going to show you is early morning sequence, but even so, I had to make sure that the mornings were lit the same, because everything was shot on different days. I used reflector boards to fill in dead areas and just put over the atmosphere and the environment of the Cotswolds itself to sell the image as it is portrayed. To add to this, you'll notice that there is sound effects which are being laid down, which appear to be natural but they're not, to create the countryside. So in some of the shots, for example, I was right beside a main road, but you wouldn't know that. And then to completely complete the scenario, we have ethereal music which pads out the feel and gives it this really big openness and space and natural feel to it, and leads the viewer into the introduction to the Cotswolds about being one of the most beautiful areas in England, and creates this feeling that they want to go there, which was the whole point of the video.
Many people agree that the Cotswold area is the most delightful...
So that was the introduction into the Cotswolds film. Now further on into the film, it actually visits various places of interest, and this is put over to the viewer so that the viewer gets a feel of what may be of interest to him if they ever went to the Cotswolds. Now this is a very, very good example of simple but effective editing, and it's the style of editing that you see every day on television, in the news, day-to-day programmes. This works all the time. And the simplest way to do this, obviously this particular film was done on professional equipment. You could do it equally well, although quality does come down to whatever equipment you're using, obviously, but you can do it equally well on domestic equipment. Now the way I laid it down was quite simply, you take the voice, the narrative, when they're talking about their subject, it is the person that happens to know about the subject, so they put it over with enthusiasm. That's the first part. You take the narrative and you mix the narrative with appropriate sound effects and perhaps music. Now you can do this live straight onto the linear track. Now then what I did was edit the pictures to go with the narrative. But bear in mind, in my particular case, in shooting this video, every single shot has been lit. It's been created to look the best possible way. Now this is the difference between an amateur doing a subject and a professional. In my particular case, there is a budget and a brief, and I have the time to create every single shot and use lighting to my advantage. Now obviously in an amateur's case, if they're shooting perhaps just go around a stately home for their own enjoyment, they're not going to have the same facilities. But there is no reason why they can't take a similar range of shots if they think ahead and they're going to be editing this, a similar range of shots, a bit of narrative, a bit of sound effects, mix them all together and end up with the same sort of effect. So let's just have a look at a piece from the film, and you can see how it all goes together.
We have a large collection of man traps, so in case you should step on those, we also have a very large selection of artificial legs in the room we've just gone through. One of the most interesting exhibits is Lieutenant Lampriere's balloon, which was probably about 1870. And he made it, and he used to go up to 10,000 feet, and he had 3 different parachutists that used to jump out. Now one parachute is on view here, Mary Mertens, and they only had a wooden ring to hold on to. They had no harness, no nothing, and they came down. 2 of them lived, I'm afraid one died. We really are a wealth of information, great interest to young and old, And we are open daily from April to October, from 11 until 6.
Now, editing can be just as much fun as shooting. However, one has to remember that the time involved can take away your enthusiasm. For example, the Heineken piece, the introduction Heineken piece, lasted just over a minute, and that took 2 days to edit on a professional suite. That would easily have taken twice as long as that on domestic equipment because of the timing problems. Professional equipment is very, very accurate when it comes to timing, and the domestic tends to waver slightly. The Cotswold film is about an hour long, and that took almost 3 weeks to edit, continually all the way through. So it gives you an idea of how much time goes into this sort of thing. So if you ever shoot and you think you're going to shoot to edit, always remember to give yourself enough time to enjoy what it is you're going to be doing. Because I can assure you, you'll think it's a 10-minute job, and you'll still be there at midnight, and your wife will be saying, "Are you coming to bed or not?"
Now, music, of course, as we've touched upon earlier, is an important part of video production. And it was quite exciting to see how Bob had treated the subject of the Heineken Music Festival and used music as a strong introduction to his film. Now, obviously, with our case and our Blooming Flowers, we've had to use a gentler paced approach, although we haven't abandoned the editing principles of keeping the action there in the shots. Now, just as a bit of fun, I've assembled a piece of film now to a fast track of music from AVP, and we're just going to show what you can do despite the subject matter with music. If you intend to shoot with editing in mind to produce productions such as these, then current tape formats will feature heavily in your decision making. Here's Charles Manolescu from Piccadilly Audiovisual Systems.
VHS is a very popular format. I think there's about 400 million VHS decks in use in the world today. But it's only good for recording off air and playing back your home television pictures. Or playing back the pre-recorded tapes that you may get from the video rental shops. It is not a good format to use as acquisition and post-production because the resolution is not high enough, the signal-to-noise ratio is not high enough, and the sub-carrier frequency is not high enough. So it's important, therefore, that you choose a format that does give you superior pictures. SVHS and Hi8 both fit this bill. Both of them offer excellent acquisition capabilities, and SVHS especially offers a tremendous advantage when in a post-production environment.
I asked Martin Phillips of the post-production company The Sharper Image based in Cheltenham how much their edit suite differs from our domestic one.
In one respect, it doesn't differ very much at all, because all we're trying to do here is taking our stock material, our original material, and putting it on an edited form on the master tape. So it's not really that different from the home setup. But in another respect, it couldn't be any further removed because we have sound equipment here, the mixing desk, to filter out any unwanted sound that could interrupt or intrude when we're filming, the vision mixer to put any effects on, and also the caption generator, the computer, which puts any credits, etc., titling, which a lot of people would tend to use in their camcorder if the camcorder has that facility. So we're working here basically to the same principles, but at a much higher level.
This higher level leads us to editing accuracy. On professional equipment, at the end of each video track, we record what is known as time code, which gives us a precise way of identifying each frame of video. We've superimposed the time code on this monitor picture, This shows us hours, minutes, seconds and frames, with 25 frames equaling 1 second. As Bob mentioned, we need this accuracy in order to perform more complex edits, like we saw in the Heineken film. Even if you haven't the luxury of timecode, here's a useful tip. If you have a mains deck with hi-fi sound and audio dub, firstly, assemble edit your footage to the mains deck, recording the sound on the hi-fi channels. Now, hi-fi is recorded with a video picture signal, so you have an edited film with hi-fi sound. Now, play your edited tape back. Connect some cables to take your hi-fi sound out of the deck and into an audio mixer, and then in turn take some cables back from the audio mixer into the linear sound inputs on your mains deck. Put the machine into audio dub and simply mix the original soundtrack with music and commentary perhaps. You will have an edited film with a mixed soundtrack on your linear channel. If you make a mistake, just start again. The original hi-fi soundtrack will always be there, as it was recorded with the video information, and will therefore always be in synchronization with the pictures. This is a very neat way of improving your finished program. Other items of equipment that can improve your production are character generators for captions and graphics, picture enhancers if you're copying from VHS to VHS for example, and even video mixers for special effects. Always use good quality cables for connections if you're intending to do a lot of editing work. Look after your equipment. A head cleaner should be considered, and a machine will need periodic maintenance in order to protect your cherished moments and the tape you edit onto. Lastly, before we run our finished film Usk in Bloom, consider the tips towards production we have given you. Keep your shots short. Use establishing shots. Close-ups. Go for unusual angles. Keep a shooting list for reference when you edit. Use music to add moods. And a voiceover can link subjects. Happy editing!
As spring dawns upon this former Welsh market town, and thoughts start to turn towards a new year of Usk in Bloom, the banks of the approaches into town, sensing this, become a carpet of yellow, as the daffodil brings welcome colour to Usk. The town itself, still looking bare after the long winter months, awaits new life as trees begin to blossom, even in the shadow of the castle turrets. Along the riverbank, flowers signal the first gathering of the volunteer Usk in Bloom workforce, whose help is invaluable towards the town's success. Jane Morris of Usk Garden Centre and Nurseries explains.
Basically, the committee come down here at the beginning of the year and we plant the boxes up. We've decided the colour schemes, we've got all the seeds and all the plants ready, and all the committee come down, have a jolly good work party and start the boxes up. We put all the soil in, we put all the plants in, and then we put them in the greenhouse for a month or so to come on before we can bring them out at their peak, really, at their very best.
Time for a break from all the planting. With a brief history of Usk in Bloom is the owner of the Nag's Head, Michael Keyes.
This is the 11th year that Usk in Bloom has been in existence, started up by a few volunteers that thought the town needed tidying up and that floral displays would attract visitors to the town. At the beginning there were just 2 or 3 people involved and it was extremely hard work. Since then the volunteer force that have come and helped us has increased, and as you can see the town has justifiably got the name of the prettiest town in Wales.
In fact, the town of Usk has won the Britain in Bloom finals twice. And to get some idea of the quantity of plants that make this town such a winner, we meet up with Sid Lilystone.
I came into Usk some 6 years ago and was very impressed with the number of hanging baskets going on with the shops and houses. And out of curiosity I began to count. It's a little habit I've got, using an automatic counter. The hanging baskets, the count this year was 996. The window boxes and containers, which I do separately, was 1,929. The number of plants, which we've calculated on an average to fill all of these containers, etc., would be in the region of 40 to 45,000 plants.
Ken Magnus, who lives up Monmouth Road, has much praise for Uskin Bloom's contribution towards the quality of life here.
I think Uskin Bloom has done a wonderful thing for the town, especially in the respect of the estate agents. We get such a lot of visitors coming here, and there's so many people desirous of living in Usk and retiring to Usk because it's such a nice, pretty place, isn't it? It's a beautiful place. And it's all done through Uskin Bloom. If it was a drab sort of town, I couldn't see people coming here and wanting to buy property, could you?
Someone who did just that and moved here from Yorkshire after falling in love with Usk is Anne Wilkinson.
Well, Usk is an idyllic place to live. It's so beautiful, the flowers in the town. It's just superb. We're very lucky to live here. People ask us why we don't move back to Yorkshire, but even though North Yorkshire is absolutely beautiful, it's got nothing on Usk because this has just got to be the nicest place in Great Britain.
Peter and Betty Woodywis, who also moved to Usk recently, found that their love of gardening made them very popular with their new neighbours.
Being invalided out of work, I had to have another interest, and I only started gardening after I was invalided out of work. And coming down here, idle hands get up to mischief, and I want to make the time work for me as opposed to just sitting twiddling my thumbs. So I got a greenhouse, and I seem to produce all the plants for the neighbourhood down here now. I've realised how friendly people are, and it's most unusual now when I walk to get my paper if I don't say good morning to somebody about 12 times. And I find it an extremely friendly place, and people are quite helpful. Is borne out by the way Uskin Bloom has prospered, because people are proud of their little town and everybody seems to make an effort. I think the number of hanging baskets and the number of plant containers bears testimony to this. No matter where you look in Usk, you'll find somebody's put flowers out and somebody's tried to improve the appearance of the town. And I think people who live in Usk really like Usk and they try to make the best of it.